We're looking at stretch slip skirts today. So whether you need to add a little something for transparency or a little warmth, this might just be the easiest skirt you've ever made because there's no pattern. And when I say zero pattern, I mean some fabric, some pegs, maybe 3 or pins, cut a seam and sew it, one only, and something for your waist. That's it. No pattern other than that. And very minimal sewing. This video is separated into 3 complete sections. The first one is the standalone stretch slip skirt, and then we'll switch over and look at how to insert a stretch slip skirt into an existing project. So that's my quarter circle skirt, which had a bit of transparency. And then the final section is an evaluation. So jump around as you need and let's get going. We're working on a standalone skirt. It's out of this beautiful, very flexible and a little sheer, but nice and fluid, stretch a little bit, wool material. So it'll be warm, minimal stretch. Now the first thing you're going to do, you're going to wrap this around yourself with the most stretchy side around you. You're going to make 3 types of measurements. The first one is the waist measurement. So get your material lying and flowing straight as you can. And if you were going to do a waist measurement, obviously you'd do it there. But I'm not. Like, you all know that I have a high hip type of join in my clothes, and that's where I'm going to be doing it. It will be a hipster slip skirt for me. So I've got it where I want it to sit. I put my first peg there. And then the next bit is just to work out where on my body is the next wide bit of me. Now, I've got a wider hip and bum. I don't have wider thighs, but you might. So you might need, just a couple of other little pegs more than what I've got. I'm going to put in 2 pins at this stage because one will go up and one will go down, and that's simply because when you shift around and move material, pins can fall out. So that's just a little bit of security for my markers to stay in place. All right, we've got that far on the shape. The next thing to do, test for stridability. I want to be able to walk, and it depends really on how much fabric you have. I'm going to try and make it the widest possible bit so that I can walk easily. And I've just marked that again with a peg. So there we have it. It's done, almost. But we are going to then take it to the floor to paper, because what's the point of doing it one-off and always having to do it? Having a paper pattern means we can always do it easily. So we'll put this onto the paper now. All we're doing is laying out our fabric nice and straight as we sort of had it on that fold line around our body. And then we're marking off where we had our markers. So here's my first peg at my hipster join line. Yours might be your waist join line. And I just mark that in. Then I'm going to my next wider join marker. And lastly, I get down to the bottom of the skirt. It's kind of a quasi length marker. I'm going to double check that as well. But I also am going to just see, have I got actually any more room in this fabric? I think I ended up having like a little bit of wiggle room of about 1 inch more. So I'm going to make it as big as I can because I like to be able to walk. All right, we've got those markers on the paper, and now it's just a matter of joining them all up. So I take the ruler from the hemline all the way up to my hipster line and make sure that that covers over the other marker point. Otherwise, I'm going to have to make it wider. Okay, fortunately, this does cover off my wide hip bum measurement, so that's fine. It's sort of an A-line shape. Okay, going out like the long A of a capital A. And as you can see, I'm choosing that wider measurement there. I've got a couple of little dots. I've gone, there you go, got the wider one because I want the stride room. So that's my skirt line, the one seam that we're going to have to sew. And now I'm going to do a nice straight perpendicular line for the waist. Done. And the last little thing that we've got to do is, of course, the hem. So I'm reasonably approximate in my length at the minute. And I am going to now go and, well, I'll see if it's actually long enough or too long. It's probably going to be too long. But off screen here, I can touch the floor without bending my knees. So I'm just doing that measurement down myself. Be nice if you had someone else to help you with the length, wouldn't it? Anyway, I've got the length correct. It's actually a little shorter than what I have marked. So I'm just going, nah, I'm just going to have it long. I'll keep it to the long measurement because that will factor in a hem and any, mucking around if there's problems with the hemline. Always better to have a little bit too long than it is to be too short because you can change things. So again, just making it nice and straight, and we can draw in our hemline all the way across. And that is really our pattern. All we have to do is label it. This is a slip skirt, so I will write that on at some stage, and then we're ready to cut it out. So cut, cut, cut. Pretty simple. Zoom around there as well as you can, as quick as you can, as neatly as you can. Remember, I don't put in seam allowances. I like to keep that flexible depending on how I'm going to sew things up. So mine doesn't have seam allowance. It does have hem allowance. And then the final thing I'm going to do, because this is going under this skirt, I'm just going to check that that is short enough to fit under that. And it is. So we're ready to go. Onto the fabric it goes. And we do the cutting around. I am slightly off my cutting board, so you'll see a mix of me using the rotary cutter, and then when I hit floorboards, I don't want to cut my floor, I'm switching out to my my fabric scissors. And I'm putting enough allowance at the waist so that it can fold down and encase some elastic. And then I'm just putting sufficient seam allowance along that one join line down the side so that I can join it together. And I'm done. There's only one seam to do in this design, so get to it. I'm using an overlocker, and of course you can use a sewing machine. You would just use a a straight stitch. That's what I mean, a straight stitch, because you probably don't have a whole lot of stretch going down on this vertical. If you do, you can use a very non-wide, a small zigzag stitch, and that will be perfect for your stitch. You don't have to finish the edges. Jersey doesn't fray. And now we're going to do the waist. Simply put, we're making a hem. That's it, but on the waistline. So I'm using a small zigzag stitch because it has got some stretch in my material. And I've folded down that waist sufficient to put some elastic in. I'm going to not finish off the sewing right now, so there is a gap here, and backstitch to end. That's all there is to it. That was the gap where I'll be putting the elastic into, and this is what the top of this skirt now looks like. It can stretch. To insert the elastic, we're just going to grab our trusty safety pin and skewer our piece of elastic. You'll have selected that before you did that top waistband because you need to know how wide the elastic is. I like a very thin elastic because I find it just feels like nothing to me. It's a bit more flexible. So just push that safety pin along your channel, and you'll find that you can then move your fabric over the elastic. The hard metal of the safety pin gives you something to hold on to and just gather up all that fabric along it, and then just pull out the fabric to get it to slide across the elastic. Easy as that. And keep on going until you're all the way around and you can find the opening where you started, and then you'll be pulling the elastic out. So here we go, here's my opening, and there's my two ends of elastic. It is now time to go and put this on my body because at the moment it looks, unevenly wrinkled. That's going to stretch out perfectly on my body, and I'm going to see how tight I want it. Once you've found how tight you want it, you've marked that on your elastic, take it to the sewing machine and we're going to secure the elastic to your desired tightness. So usually I do a box. It can be a little tricky with narrow elastic, but we just do one edge, we put the needle down, and while it's down we pivot the elastic around so we can do the next diagonal, and again keep the needle down when you hit the corner, pivot and do the side. When you get to the end of the box, I just like to run it a couple times back and forward to really hold, and that's all we do apart from trim up any excess ends. It's very soft, very thin, you won't feel a lot of bulk at all. And of course I'm keeping this super easy. This is a super easy slip. Now that's going to slide into that channel, so don't worry about that. The next job you have to do is go put it on your body again so it all sits smoothly. And when you've got that done and smoothed out, you can put 4 pegs around your body, because we're actually going to go back to the sewing machine at those peg points and secure the elastic so you don't have any folding, flipping elastic problems, which are really annoying. So we're just going to put some stay stitches there, but you have to peg it on your body first. All right, here we go with the stay stitching. I have put my elastic consistently at the top of that channel, so I'm not going to have wonky elastic. It's always right at the top of that fold line. There you go, stay stitch 1. It's just a back and forth, why can't I use this word, straight stitch. That is all. It will not affect the stretch because you've got lots of spaces between each stay stitch. Time to check the hem. Now it's going to be a bit wonky. You will have to trim and true it up. Once you've done that, all I'm doing now is the easiest hem in the world. I'm using one of my safe stretch hemming techniques, and there is a whole video on how you can find those techniques for yourself. I'll put that in the top right corner. I should also say subscribe while we are slowly getting around this hemming, because this decorative stitch does take a little while to do. It's looking like this. It does have a good amount of stretch in it, so it's the perfect stitch to use. It's just going to take a while to get around the whole hemline. So we'll just zoom ahead until I finish, and this is what it looks like. Just a fairly simple, skinny little hem which stretches perfectly, and very little texture on that underside. Well, we are finished. And the question is, do you like the final product? Would you make yourself a skirt like this? So I'll just show you a range of views. You can see them a little up on the hemline at the back. The front's perfect. Side, you can just see it going up a little bit at the back. I'm not worried about that because it's a slip skirt and it stretches. So very happy about the wearability of this. The question is, will you make one? Moving along, let's look at the sewn-in slip skirt. It has got a very stretchy synthetic polyester jersey. It's very silky, very stretchy, very smooth. And all I'm going to do is use the same pattern that I've worked out. This is why I did it on paper, so I can make multiple things, and cut that out. I'm going to do seam allowance for that single seam, and I'm going to just have an amount to add to my waistband at the top, so I don't need to encase elastic at the top at the waist. And then of course I know that it's pretty long, so I don't need to add anything to the hem. So just cutting it out, and we go along and we sew the side seam. Oh, well, it's a side seam or a back seam. It sort of does depend on where you position this skirt on yourself. So you're going to see how I wear the skirts at the end when we do the evaluation. But anyway, sew that up, overlock or sewing machine. You might want to do a straight stitch if it doesn't have a lot of stretch, or a zigzag stitch if it does have a fair bit of stretch in that direction. So now for the waist treatment. No enclosed elastic waistband for this one. We are using this faux shirred waistband. I'll put the tutorial in the right hand corner in case you want to catch up. As you know, this waistband for me has got a lining on it, and I'll be attaching my slip skirt to that lining. So on the waist of the slip skirt, we are going to mark the quarters. And there they are with my pins. We do exactly the same thing on the waistband, marking the quarters. And you can see here how I have kept my lining free from the skirt attaching to the chiffon of the waistband. So there's the skirt there, and that obviously is my chiffon faux shirred waistband, and here is my lining, which is anchored down at certain points around the waistband, just to keep it from sliding around and neat. So now we're adding the slip skirt to the lining. I'm attaching the skirt to the lining so that that seam is going to get sandwiched down underneath, and it will be sandwiched between the two skirts essentially. So when we add the lining to the waistband, or the waistband lining, we're matching up those quarter marks and just making sure that everything is stretched out if it needs to be stretched out, so that we can sew it around matching the quarter marks. Sometimes that means that one edge or one side piece is going to need more stretch than the other piece, and then you have to fiddle around and get some of those wrinkles out when you stretch it. But it's really quite an easy job. You can do this on the sewing machine as well, and just probably peg it in there so you've got a little bit more help, because the overlocker helps with tension and you can stretch things so you're matching. You see we've got the quarter marks there with the pins. It helps with that tension so that you truly can match up those quarter marks. I'm just going to keep on going around my join line, matching the quarter marks, making sure that the wrinkles are smoothed out and the curls are smoothed out. And we are almost there. I'll jump ahead now to the end. Well, there's another quarter mark. Here we go, towards the end now here. That was where I started, and I'm just going over that little start a little bit. And we are done. So at this stage it looks like this. And so to help you out with this 3D jigsaw, let's really have a look at how it's sitting. So there we go. My slip skirt is attached to that lining, and I've put the seam allowance so that it's going to be against my legs. I could have done it the other way around if I wanted to, but that's actually going to lie against my legs. And that line there should be seam free because I've tucked the other seam allowance in between the skirts. So let's flip that down. And that's what my skirt now looks like, with the tube of the slip skirt inside the actual skirt. Let's get it sorted out a little bit more. Told you it was a 3D jigsaw. All right, so we can see that it is longer than the skirt and it is a bit crooked at the hemline, so we're going to have to, square up my slip skirt. There is the seam line, so I told you that's going to be against my legs. It is pretty smooth though, so it's not going to worry me too much. You could, of course, put that on the other side so it's sandwiched between the skirts and then it wouldn't worry you at all. But it's silky material and very fluid, so I'm not too worried about that. All right, let's just throw that out again nice and long. And that gives us an idea of how much we're going to have to take off with the hem. Okay, so we just need to trim it up by however much we need it to be shorter. And I did have another go after this as well, after it was on my body, and really paid attention to evening up that disparity in lengths. So you might need to have a couple of goes to get this exact, but you're just trimming it up so that it sits square. And we're almost there. I'm keeping this super, super easy and I'm not hemming. Remember, jersey fabric, particularly polyester, stretch polyester jerseys, they don't fray. So all I'm doing is just zigzagging over that single edge of that seam line so that that doesn't unravel. And that's our second stretch slip skirt. Fully stretchy, as you can see. Let's have a look at some of the different angles, view shots, so that you can see with this one I've got the seam line down the side. And when we go to the skirt, it just floofs down over the top. And now I've got my extra little design brilliance. I can layer my woolen slip skirt underneath my full skirt. So I've got 3 layers against myself now. One of them's wool, and it's very nice and warm. And for warmer weather, of course, I don't have to put that extra layer on. So it's more trans-seasonal. And isn't versatility great in our wardrobe? On to the third part. Did I mention it was a bumper episode? Okay, we have a tiny little trail of clues. Look at the end of the seam. They've got one edge of my hem not matching up the other edge. And it didn't only happen on the one skirt, it happened on both skirts. They didn't match up. And sometimes it can be a machine problem, but I went back and checked and just made sure also that I hadn't mucked it up at the start, but it's perfectly square here. So that's my first clue. The second clue is the grain line. So that straight white line is how the grain line should be going, but you can see the red line, the red arrow, that's where the grain line's going. And I noticed this on the wool because the grain was far more pronounced. And while I was doing that folded over edge for the elastic at the waist, that's where I noticed that the grain line wasn't sitting square. So this was a big red flag that something had gone wrong. Now the last one was when we looked at the hem and we saw it really dipped down on one edge, so it wasn't square. And well, what can you do about this? Is this telling us that the whole thing is rubbish? Or is this telling us that we should go in and just adjust the hemline? Well, you can do that, and I did do that. I went in and thought, well, okay, one of the easy fixes for this would be to go in and really square up the hemline. So that's what I did do. And I also put that onto my paper pattern as well. So I laid the paper pattern down and I checked the lengths. It's hard to check on this angled side because remember, like a triangle with a hypotenuse, that hypotenuse isn't going to be the same length as a square, okay, a square side, a perpendicular side. So I am also doing a rough fold and measure to make sure I've got those lengths right. And then the other thing that I did was that I looked at the piece of material that I did cut off from the skirt after I'd marked this. It's coming up now. And yeah, I did actually do all the same markings. So I'm pretty sure now that this hemline will be square. So if I want to make another one, I know it's going to be square on the hemline, but that does not solve my grain line problem. Is grain line a problem? Well, when I came to wear the skirts, that's where you're going to notice it really. More on that later, but first a brief explanation about why the grain line is skewing. We did not have that fold line sitting at centre front. We are relying on the whole skirt to just swing and have the centre front, that perpendicular part, not where we lined it up. So that's why it's skewed. Let's look at the wearing of the skirts. One, I've got the side seam. Okay, but here I put that seam down the center back. Why did I do that? Well, it came down to material. That polyester jersey was so soft, it really didn't affect the wear feel on my body, that it was slightly skewed. But the jersey wool, well, that had a different feel. It didn't have as much stretch, and I did feel like one hip was going a little bit off, like I was being steered with the reins on a horse. Now, I'm extremely sensitive, so this may not be a problem at all for you, but I felt it, and when I rotated the seam line to the back, I had no issues at all. So that's why I put the seam line at the back for my woolen one. So will you make one? Do you have the flexibility to accept the good, even if it's not perfect? It's a very interesting question, isn't it? Let me know in the comments. Will you be making one? I'm going to go off and enjoy my quarter circle skirt. It's been a very long project. I hope you've enjoyed it. We are finally finished. If you've missed it, you can always go back and look at all the episodes. And next week, we actually are going into a full correction into an A-line skirt of this little slip skirt pattern. So that's also going to be super interesting. Join us next time. And in the meantime, enjoy your comfy life. And do subscribe. You can just click on my face right now. See you next time.